onto the front of the airplane.
At the time of the attack, the Pentagon was in the initial phase of a massive renovation project. As part of this renovation, it was Dr. Mlakar and his fellow engineers in Vicksburg that had helped design the Pentagon's protection against terrorist attack. By sheer coincidence, the terrorists on 9/11 had managed to strike the only part of the Pentagon that had already been retrofitted. The difference between the two sections was astonishing.
There was actually a brick wall that separated two offices near the Corridor 5 side. And on one side of the wall was an office that was quite occupiable, that you could move in there tomorrow. And on the other side, it was a totally burned out office. There was just ash everywhere.
The part of the building most severely affected by the crash was in the newly renovated section. And what happened here was nothing short of miraculous. Although the first floor and part of the second floor were destroyed, the remaining 3 floors survived for 20 minutes, suspended in midair.
The people directly above the point of impact in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors all got out before the structure collapsed. So that was a very, very important factor in their survival.
In a scenario much like the collapse of the Twin Towers, the heat of the fire weakened the steel, which here was encased in concrete columns.
When we examine all the columns that were destroyed by the aircraft impact, what is amazing is that not more of the Pentagon collapsed than did.
The Pentagon's success in withstanding the ravages of 9/11 was all the more remarkable since the engineers designed its protection for a very different kind of attack.
Some provision was made for the possibility of a vehicular bomb from outside the Pentagon.
Experiments like these helped them determine which materials to use to harden the building's defenses.
This is the Impact and Explosion Effects branch, and we look at projectiles as they impact structures. We look at material properties and how they respond. This is our 83 millimeter powder gun, which is part of our projectile penetration facility.
These are some of the various projectiles, all modeled to scale.
And what we're looking at right here is the breech section, where we actually will load our projectiles in, whatever they happen to be. We'll put a powder charge in there.
This camera, which runs at 100 million frames per second, captures the blast. The engineers then run the data through their supercomputers, some of the fastest in the world. This enables them to test various kinds of bombs against different buildings without doing any damage. But the experiments and computations are only part of their process. They also need the real thing.
It's very important to look at the way structures perform in actual events.
That's why the Army engineers studied past attacks, like the bombings on the U.S. embassies in East Africa, the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, and Oklahoma City, and they learned an important lesson.
In the Oklahoma City bombing, most of the casualties came from the collapse of the building itself, but most of the injuries to people that survived the bombing came from glass breakage or other debris flying.
To try to prevent those kinds of injuries, the Pentagon's exterior walls were strengthened with an earlier version of a fiber-reinforced polymer like this.
So that when this wall is subjected to a blast loading, it will shatter like an ordinary concrete block wall. But this film will keep those fragments from flying into the room and injuring the occupants.
And the Pentagon also got brand new windows that looked like ordinary ones, but were in fact blast resistant.
The windows are resistant to a blast up to a certain level. They are designed beyond that level to fail gracefully. That is, the glass shatters, but is retained within the frame.
On 9/11, almost all the conventional windows in the unrenovated section were destroyed, while most of the blast-resistant windows survived.
The blast-resistant windows were quite sturdy, quite durable. They allowed the structure to stand for a longer period before it collapsed.
I'm absolutely convinced that the way that Pentagon was constructed is why we're sitting here talking today and I didn't get killed on September the 11th.